30-day BD challenge kicks off February 9th in the elite recruiter community. This was the most awesome sales and BD summit yet. But here's the thing. Now is the time for action. We are kicking off on February 9th, a 30-day BD challenge to start putting everything into action. Whether you need a little bit of help in the BD side or you just need the accountability, join the elite recruiter community and join us for the BD challenge, because I want 2026 to be the year that you crush it. This is your year. Own it. Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
They wouldn't have even known that it was valuable. But us as recruiters, that's where I think our value comes, is we have this perspective and this point of view where we can tell you, like, apples to apples, I see it. And so I can tell you this is different. And I think that what a lot of recruiters, myself included, are a lot of times not prepared for is like the days when you're like, there's no worse job than this.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
Admin is a massive waste of time. That's why there's Atlas, the AI first recruitment platform built for modern agencies. It doesn't only track resumes and calls. It remembers everything, every email, every interview, every conversation, instantly searchable, always available. And now it's entering a whole new era. With Atlas 2.0, you can ask anything and it delivers. With Magic Search, you speak and it listens. It finds the right candidates using real conversations, not simply looking for keywords. Atlas 2.0 also makes business development easier than ever. With opportunities, you can track, manage, and grow client relationships powered by generative AI and built right into your workflow. Need insights? Custom dashboards give you total visibility over your pipeline. And that's not theory. Atlas customers have reported up to 41% EBITDA growth and an 85% increase in monthly billings after adopting the platform. No admin, no silos, no lost info, nothing but faster shortlists, better hires, and more time to focus on what actually drives revenue. Atlas is your personal AI partner for modern recruiting. Don't miss the future of recruitment. Get started with Atlas today and unlock your exclusive listener offer at recruitwithatlas.com. I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast because here's the thing. As we are walking into the age of AI, as we are walking into 2026, the recruiter that will disappear is the transactional recruiter. You need to figure out how to go deeper. You need to figure out how to go deeper for your clients. You need to figure out how to go deeper with the candidates, and you need to figure out how to go deeper for yourself. Because here's the thing. Technically speaking, we're all doing the same fucking thing. How do you differentiate yourself so that way you can command the fees and command the worth that you know that you are worth? We're going to talk about that with this episode. So Jacob, real quick, before we just start doing a deep dive, quick self-introduction.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I love the podcast. I love what you do here, and I've taken a lot from it, so I'm pumped to be here. I've been in recruiting for the last decade. I was at Allegis Group, which we share that, but got a great base there. I was in a smaller region, and so we did a lot of senior level contract IT recruiting, and the more places that I went, the more people were wanting the direct placement style. And so over those 3 years, just kept hitting the same thing. And so finally that business model didn't quite work for tech systems. And so I was like, well, everybody wants it around here. So let's get into it. And that was when I started my firm. That was 6 years ago, which I own, Future State Careers. And I've been doing that for a little over 6 years. And then about 3 months ago, launched a platform that we're really excited about called wholestory.me that we can get into. But that's a quick version.
Well, we'll kind of weave that into that. Like, how did you even end up at the Allegis Group? Like, there's so many different careers out there. How'd you end up in the wonderful world of recruiting?
Sure. So very kind of a typical route, like nobody knows about this before they get in it for the most part. But just out of school, got connected with tech systems, had several different options to go from that point. But as you know, a lot of the recruiting's tough, obviously for anybody listening, recruiting's tough. So it's like you lean hard into the culture. And I remember taking the tech systems job for quite a bit less than a few of the other offers that were present at the time, because, they do the half day and they get you in, and it's a big selling point. And so I think that was it. Like, I, from the start, always knew I wanted to be around people that I would look and say, okay, when I'm that age, if I'm what they are, am I going to be good with that? And I think I really got that from that, being able to see that culture And so, yeah, got in, didn't even know what it was. Most of the searches that I did were just people on Reddit being like, this recruiter screwed me over. This, and I was like, oh no, okay, so we'll get into being part of the solution, even though that was, a little bit of a jaded perspective. But so, yeah, as soon as I got in, spent a lot of time in the IT space, which, is a pretty big ramp to learn all that stuff. But yeah, culture is definitely what brought me in, and it's been what's kept me.
That's what I love. Even like you have your own firm now. You're not with I know at Aerotech, we called it like the blue Kool-Aid. It was Tech Systems, like the gray Kool-Aid or something like that. But like you still like, even though you have your own firm, like the culture, you can keep the culture and like you can have that culture with other recruiters out there. So I got to ask you, what finally moved you to the point for saying like, okay, cool, I'm done with this big agency. Big agency life is done for me. I'm going to move on to the next chapter.
Mm-hmm. I just knew, I think there's a book I'm reading right now called Propeller, and it talks about below the line thinking and above the line thinking. And below the line is like a lot of excuse making, or like, this is happening to me. Above the line is like, what else can I do to make this, And so I have nothing but great things to say about Tech Systems. I love the people that I was there with, but it obviously presents its challenges being a part of a large place. I mean, anybody who's broken off and started a small firm probably has very similar. There's not a whole lot of unique stuff in that reasoning. But it was just one of those things where I knew I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to, when you run into things that are just a part of being a part of a large organization and you're like, I don't know if I do it that way. Well, don't complain about it if you're going to complain about it, and do something about it. So I think that was really, just the running into those things and being like, you see certain solutions, but, a place like that has its business model. And it's like, if the clients are dictating this, not that we're going to try and get them to do something else, but we can't accommodate that because it doesn't work for what we're trying to do here. And so that was one of those things where I was like, man, it feels like you're working really hard to fit a round peg in a square hole type thing with a lot of these discussions. And so it was just one of those things where I definitely didn't ever want to get to the place where you're just blaming it on this or that. But it's like, okay, if we see the opportunity, we're either going to make this work or we're going to go attack that. And so that was what ultimately got me over to that side. And then also to be like the pure motivation of there's no one else to blame ever but you. And there's something really pure about that I like a lot.
Your first few months on your own, like how hard was it for you to launch?
I mean, launching itself was easy from, getting incorporated and all those types of things.
I mean, that's not the important stuff. Don't get lost in that stuff. I mean, like when it talks to like your first few bucks.
Yeah. So got started in October, had our daughter in February, and then COVID hit. So it was 2019. So yeah, I mean, it was tough. The places that you're calling are saying, we're just trying to hold on to our people. Like, we don't want to talk to you about, trying to bring on new ones. So that was difficult, but I was really thankful because I was really close with the people from my office. So I didn't want to go back and compete with them. And so not only did I have a non-compete, but I didn't want to compete anyways. So I went into accounting and finance from IT, which was a relatively close transition. And then it was just kind of like day one, you're back to work. It's the same daily functions, just learning a new industry. And so getting off the ground itself wasn't as difficult as just the timing was a little tricky with COVID, but that was, you talk to a lot of people had that same experience. So it was just part of it. I think it built me. Starting off on something difficult like that makes the rest seem pretty easy.
Can you believe like how long ago COVID was, but it doesn't feel that way?
No, and now people will say, since COVID, and it's like, dang, we're getting to the place. It's like, it's been a while, like
we got a bunch to talk about the frameworks. I'm excited about digging in, but I just want to go back to like your entry, your story, your launching. You said back to work. What were your KPIs to get yourself off the ground?
We had the ones at Tech Systems, where you're trying to get 5 lunches a week. You're trying to get, we call them IOIs, in-office interviews. So those are ones, where you're having people in for the interview. So I was trying to follow those, but just throw them on steroids. It was just kind of you work all the time, morning to night, put the kids down, go back to work. So the KPI, I didn't even have KPIs. It was just like, don't ever stop. It was more was the KPI. Like, this isn't enough, keep doing more. So, we had, we called them G2s, which was conversations with the candidate. I think we had maybe 25 a week or something like that at the time. You had the 5 lunches, you had 3 IOIs, which were the in-office interviews. We had a resume KPI that we tracked, but yeah, I think that ours was it also talking about that transition from how much am I supposed to do to just how much can I do? My only limiting factor is time. And so it was just a big shift. And I think that's what I'm talking about. The motivation becomes so pure where it's like, I have no choice but to do this. We're going to go as hard as we can. So the KPIs almost got thrown out the window to just say, let's blow everything out of you wanted to track so you could see what's working, but there was no minimum threshold.
When in the journey did you start bringing on team members?
I think I went 2.5 years before my first person. The funny thing was, one of the biggest placements that I ever made it, got the acceptance, closed on it, went downstairs to tell my wife. And I was like, you're not going to believe this. And at the time, I think it was maybe a, $40,000 placement, something like that. I mean, a great placement. And she was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I always believed in you. And I was like, dude, this can't be all I get. It's like she was excited, but she was like, yeah, I always knew that this, I always knew you'd be able to do this. And so that was where I was like, dude, these wins, celebrating these with a team, you can't beat that. And so that was when I was like, all right, no more. It's time to bring somebody else doing this with people. So that was kind of when I knew it was like, and I always knew, like, I didn't, the solopreneur thing, there's definitely a lot of positives to it. And it can lead to an amazing life. But for me, working with people is like what gets me out of bed type thing. So I was like, I knew it was just a matter of time. And so it was about 2.5 years before our first person.
So when did you, and we're going to start moving and shifting because we have a lot to talk about with the frameworks that we want to walk through. But when did you start sitting down and realizing like, okay, like I don't want to be the surface level person anymore. I need to start going deeper.
I think you feel that all the time. You're always looking for ways you can differentiate. But I think it has been exacerbated over the last, really like year. We've always thought like that, right? Like anybody who goes and starts their own thing, or is just not even that, but just once more is always looking for like, what's the edge you can get? What's the different thing I can do? You talked about KPIs, like I don't want to just hit a set of numbers. Like I want to really change the way we do things in a good way. But over the last probably year, it just feels like things are moving so fast that it's becoming cliche to say, like, you've got to stay up with the times. Like, it's so obvious right now, adapt or die, like never before. And so I think lately it's been not just knowing that we have to continue to grow in these new things, but it's not such low-hanging fruit as just, we've got to learn the tools. And we've got to start incorporating AI, and we've got to start, like, it's much deeper than that, because I think that those things, you start looking around, you have to have a good amount of pattern recognition, but you start to look around and be like, we think we're being different. We think we're adapting. All the things we're doing are just pretty uniform across the board. Like everybody you talk to is doing those similar things, even when you're pushing so hard. And so I think that that's been the realization over the last year or two, because it didn't necessarily have to be so differentiated 5 years ago, right? Take candidates, for example. Now if you have 500 applicants for a position versus 5 years ago, if you had 30 or 40, you could go through those, make sure you got the right people, be thorough, talk to everybody. And then you get to a place where and then you have conversations that allow you to get to that core foundation of who somebody is. But nowadays you don't have that luxury. And that's true of the recruiting companies. It's true of us, as companies trying to attract people. And so I think that has been the shift that's felt so pertinent to right now, that's made us be like, this is no longer adapt or die. This is like adapt or lose who we are, is more of what it feels like.
So as you started like this journey of like, okay, everybody's doing the same fucking thing, even though we think we're special. Like, when did you shift the gear and like, maybe the focus needs to be the people compared to all those other things I could be focusing on as a leader?
The real trigger for us was, we do for the most part accounting and finance recruiting, right? But we get hit up by hundreds of candidates all the time who are, like out looking for help. Most good recruiters, you care about people or else you'd hate the job. So we're talking to these people, but we only have the jobs we have, right? As a recruiter, like we've got these 15 jobs we're working on. If you're in engineering or it doesn't matter what it is. If you're not in this sector, like I can give your resume a second set of eyes or I can consult with you, whatever it is. But outside of that, I've only got these jobs. And so we started thinking like, what is the thing, if we're able to advocate for someone, great, this doesn't necessarily apply. But for all of these candidates who we just have to say, here's a second set of eyes on your resume and best of luck, we wanted to be able to give them something. And so that was when we started looking at like, what is that thing? And then you started looking at what is the thing that actually differentiates these candidates. And this is so applicable across all industries, across every job function. And that was where we started creeping to where we are now, which is a much heightened awareness of these levels. So talking about the framework, talking about going deeper, this is what really started to, because any good recruiter, especially a tenured recruiter, it's cliche to even say like everybody's resumes look the same. We all know that they all look relatively similar at a certain level, right? Like similar job titles, even great resumes. I'm not discounting resumes. Similar job titles, similar job functions, similar, at an elite level, similar criteria that they've done or metrics that they've hit or whatever it is. But with Whole Story, there's a big video component. And so we started watching these whole stories, fantastic people these days who aren't getting interviews, right? So we're just confused by this at the start. Like, why? You're amazing to talk to. Why are you not getting these interviews? Well, so then we start looking at the whole stories as they start to pour in. People from coast to coast, from C-level to right out of college. And you watch these things and what you start to see is what we see in resumes of, these repeating patterns. But you hear somebody's video and you'd be like, gosh, that's better. That's different. That's deeper. Then you listen to the next one and it's very similar. And you're like, wait a sec. And then you go to the next one and it's very similar again. Okay, that's 3 people in a row who have said their why is people and their family. It's like, we're starting to uncover something that is, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. Like my why, people and family, right? There's nothing bad about it. But on its own, we started to get to a place where it's like, you are unique and really who we are is all we have, right? That's our differentiator, our one of one. But we're stopping at a certain level, right? So when you say my family is my why, I would do anything to provide for them. Be like, well, when we're talking about you going up against 10 other people, you think that's unique or you think that's your differentiator. And while it might be, that's all of these people's differentiator too. But as you get deeper, it starts to branch out. And that's where you start to get unique, right? What family and people being my driving force is very different for me than it might be for you, right? Like for me, it could be the reason I never moved. For you, it could be the reason why you work all night, every night to provide, it's very different branches of. So that is what started to really open our eyes to something that I think is becoming more and more pertinent. And it's slowly creeping in a way that people don't quite fully understand the impact.
So we're talking with candidates and, the surface level, the candidate intake call, many times, what was it, the old G2s where you just like checkbox, 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 checkbox. All right, cool. Let me get you over the candidate.
Yeah.
Almost like AI can do that nowadays. So like, how do you start asking these deeper questions? And like we'll just say like the family being a differentiator. Are you calling that like tier 1 is what kind of like what we chatted about in the pregame? So how do you get past that transactional level to go deeper where it can also help the candidate and your client?
A lot of times people are looking for the questions to ask. And while there are questions to prod, I think that the baseline discovery is acknowledging that it exists at all, right? So I think that as recruiters, we have a very unique perspective that these candidates definitely don't have. And even internal recruiters, even though they're seeing a lot of these, like we're seeing them across industries, across skill sets, across experience levels, everything. And so I think it's up to us to go to these candidates to lovingly, and by the way, this doesn't happen without you caring about them, because it's much, much easier to just get the warm and fuzzies, get a good gut feeling about somebody and be like, look, we got a great person, here they are, right? And it's also a little bit uncomfortable if done in the incorrect way to tell somebody, like I just told you, like, look, you're unique, but what you've got right here is not unique. And the reason why I can tell you that's true is because I've looked at 100 resumes. I've watched 100 whole stories this week, right? So instead of you going to somebody and being like, oh, I can tell you put a lot of effort and time into this, that can be true, but to say, hey, we're not there yet. And so there's 4 things, the way that we frame this up, like you said, we talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. So let's use, just because it's one it's very typical, is, I love working with people. I love pouring into people. That's a very, on its face, great. Is it something you should say? Yes. Is it something that makes you a great candidate? Yes. Right. So don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But number 1 is kind of like what you do or who you are at a definition level. Number 2 is like what you say you value. So you take the people to say, at every company I've been to, I've always gone to try and mentor anyone who needs it, even if they're outside of my purview. Number 3 is, what do you actually consistently do? So that may be like, look, I take time out of my day, when I'm swamped, I'll do work after work to make sure I finish my tasks, because I want to sit down and give this person who needs this feedback or this instruction the time, or I want to listen to this thing that's going to help them move to the next, whatever their next part in their career is. And then number 4, and this is the kind of the kicker, is like when you start to get to a place where it's like, what did it cost you? Right? Like, what did you sacrifice to get there? And it doesn't have to be so dramatic, but it's like, what did it cost you and how do you define success here? So for example, let's take the people one. Tier 1, I love people. I love working with people. I'm a people person. Tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 is you get to, look, not only did I sacrifice my time at work, which potentially cost me my evenings with my kids and my family because I've got to catch up on work because I wanted to give you the time and focus that you deserve. But I talked to a candidate, for example, who talked about being so about training people that she was like, the biggest form of success that I've ever experienced was someone that I had trained getting a promotion over me, from going a couple levels below to getting above me. And she was like, I know it sounds like I'm making this up to make myself feel good, but that's different, right? To be like, I am training somebody so thoroughly that they supersede my position within the company. And that's my definition of success. That's tier 4 versus,
And that-
I love work.
And that's like a person that like you want to give to your client.
No,
like this person can like 5 to 10x.
no question.
Maybe we would just walk through this. So you got a high level finance role. We'll say VP of finance. You're sitting there talking with this candidate, and like you typically going through the G2 questions or the normal questions that you have written up, and you get to one question. She's just like everybody else. How do I differentiate myself? Or how do you ask going from a tier 1 to a tier 2? Like we'll say to people, like, how do I get that out of her? Like a tier 2 answer.
Sure. So I think that letting them peek behind the curtain again to understand, giving them the statistics. Hey, here's what you said. 80% of the people that you're going against or the people of this skill set have that same thing listed. So that's number 1. But trying to get them to number 2 is much more about getting them to understand than asking prodding questions. And then as you prod, I don't know, like, when you go into ChatGPT or anything that you're going into, it's like, no, deeper. No, this isn't enough. No, I need more. Just like, and so I think that you, through giving them this framework and telling them like, here's what we're looking to do, showing them examples, because there's no better exercise that I've experienced than watching it in real time. Right. So there's nothing that you could do. Maybe even you snippet other resumes, nobody's information's given out, nothing, but you say like, look, these things that you said, I took the time to really pour out who I am. And then you show them, be like, this is not meant to offend you. In fact, again, I'm only showing you this because I care, because it takes a lot more effort from our end to do this. Right. Same thing with the companies. It's you'll watch and say, look, what's different about this company? How many times have you heard this? We're like a family here. And you're like, okay, that's good. The same thing that I like working with people. That's great that you're like a family. What does that mean? Because 10 out of 10 companies that we just talked to said that they're like a family. And a great example, I sat down with the company. We were working on a controller position, and I took 10 controller positions from across the South, and I snippeted them so that they all just got like the similar portions. And I said, can you guys tell me which job posting is yours? And the answer was no. And they couldn't even get close. They had no idea. And so it's such an eye-opening experience to see, to be like, oh no, like I had no idea. Because we all know to some extent that were saying similar things, right? If you've been in business for any amount of time, if you're a recruiter like us and you come and say, what's different about you guys? Well, we really care about the client. Okay. We work really hard. We put relationships over transactions. We've all heard these, right? It's getting past those things. And I think we just don't quite understand when we're saying them how pertinent it is. And so I think that more so than questions, like it's more to just say, look, I think we can keep digging, because as recruiters, we should know. We've seen it when it looks better. We've seen, here's a company example. We're like a family. What does that mean? Walked all the way down to, we have a guy on one of these teams who he kept coming to work with a tire that was a little bit flat. So what we did was took up a silent contribution among the team, put 4 new tires on his car, didn't tell him who it had come from, and did it while he was at work, goes out to his car, there's 4 new tires on his car at work. 2 things, same company, both true, right? Like we're like a family here. Yeah, that's a family thing to do. That's a family thing to do. But do you see the difference? One is tier 1 up here. It's definitional. One is down here and it's action, and it cost us. And it was something very real and tangible. And I think that those are really different. I think we recognize that as recruiters.
I love that example. Picture this. There's like 4 staffing companies or exec search companies like chasing down like, hey, proposals for this job. You just got to something that was deep and personal that the company did for somebody else. How did you even was that like what you call like a tier 4 question?
Yes.
With a company, you're trying to win their business, or this is part of their intake call. You're walking through all this stuff. How did you even yank that story out of them? Like you could sit there and be like on the phone with a candidate, like, hey, like when I talk about this is exactly the type of company because they did X, Y, and Z. But how do you go that deep to even get that from a client, potential client?
When you're sitting in a room, so I'm sitting in the room with, this is the entire C-suite of this company that I'm sitting with, a decent sized company, a 4,500 person company. And it was sitting there asking them like, okay, so you guys have said all this stuff, because what we know to be true, the same thing to be like when you get somebody's resume or you get the job description and you're almost like, look, as recruiters, we deal with this every day. This all looks standard. I got this pretty much in my sleep. Now let's get to the real meat of our actual sales pitch to any candidate or to any company. Like we've got to get to the core of you. So you're sitting with them and you say like, let's say that somebody can go down the road and get 15 or 20K more than your budget will allow. You cannot go above that. That is your top dollar. There's no way to go above it. What do we tell them to get them to come here? And I've had some people be like, I guess I'd tell them to go down the road and be like, that's a scary. That's the way you feel about this place. It's going to be difficult to sell. So when they started talking about that, it was all, and now this company was a bit of an anomaly because they were almost confused by the question because it was so obvious that this was just the way they operate every day. So it didn't even stand out as something like, oh, we're going above and beyond. We put tires on this guy's car. That wasn't even something that we would think about the next day because we'd forget about it because it's just so a part of our operating rhythm. It's so true to who we are at our core and our soul and our heart. But when I was talking to them and they start giving examples and you're like, now we're moving, then they get to that thing and it's like that should be your North Star for that's like your barometer, right? Of are we at that level? That's that level. And so once you get that, and that's when, as the recruiter, I want to bring a lot of energy to that part of the conversation because I want it to start like the adrenaline, the emotion. We're all coming together here for something that's exciting and something that makes you want to work here. That's the type of thing that makes you proud to be at the place that you're about to sell to the candidate. That's the thing that makes us as recruiters be like, you want to see a recruiting team go to bat for you every night of the week and weekend and go for this company above all these other clients that we have, because that is different. That's something that I want my family to be a part of. That, and it's a different thing. And you know it when you hear it as a recruiter. And it's very obvious. And I think that, again, the tricky part is that we get a good gut feeling. And I think, honestly, experienced recruiters have such great intuition that we're able to read between the lines, right? So we talk to these candidates or to these companies and we see all the things come to life before we even have to actually dig and get to the core or the root of why this place or this person is special. But these other people who may be looking for a job their first time in 10 years, or you may have a company who hasn't had to be, like this company, they might not have, they would never have told that story to a candidate. They wouldn't have even known that it was valuable. But us as recruiters, that's where I think our value comes is we have this perspective in this point of view where we can tell you like apples to apples, I see it. And so I can tell you this is different. Because when they bring that out and they say, is that something special? And you're like, oh my gosh, you guys have no idea. You have no idea that you're sitting on a gold mine because of who you are. And that's the same thing that we're bringing out of these candidates. And that's the special. And when it starts to happen, that's when you start to bring a value as a recruiter that I promise they won't get elsewhere, because you don't get to that level without having the most genuine care. That's what we're talking about when you say, I really care about candidates, wanting to pull that out of them for their own sake, not even for yours. That's the difference.
Your recruiting career started in a hyper transactional place. Because I know that's how you were trained. Simple as that. Did you have to like untrain yourself away from that transaction to go deeper? It was just like the entire time you were there, this is something that's missing.
You know, I think that I saw it done well there. And this is not at all to say something bad about anybody. I think I saw it done well there by people who didn't do super well, because like at a place like that, volume is everything, right? That was one of the reasons why doing it for yourself is like, you don't require the volume you once did at a large place. So it's much easier. You're not forced into that corner of having to be like, if I don't get this number of starts over a certain point of time, that's okay. You know, I'm able to so genuinely, like, I don't require 50 starts this month. You know, it's a different thing, but I don't think it was untraining myself as much as like, that's pretty natural to who I am. And honestly, I really believe it's natural to a lot of recruiters. I think that's, again, if you really don't love working with people, I would think, gosh, man, I would hate this job if I don't like working with people. So I don't think it was as much that. I think it was just like part of who I am. And honestly, maybe part of, without even acknowledging it at the time, maybe part of what it was like, you want to be able to focus on that without having to worry about the rest. Right? It's like when you sit across from a friend, it's like, I'm not looking for any outcome here. I just want to do what's best for you. And I mean that. And my actions show that. And so I think probably some of it had to be retrained. But I think also, you know, for anybody who maybe, if you're considering doing something on your own, and there's trade-offs, right? No solutions, only trade-offs. But knowing that you don't have to have as many to do as well financially is just it makes it so much easier. You know, it's like, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits, but it's like people aren't necessarily disciplined. It's that they set up their environment to make it easier. The people who look the most disciplined have just set up their environment. And I think that's one of the things within recruiting. If you can set that up to where it's like, my success isn't determined by X that would lead me down that path pretty easily. My success is determined by these things. And that makes it to where the only thing that I care about is the heart of this, because I know the money will follow. And so I think, you know, I know that's a long-winded answer to say, because tech systems taught me a lot of great things and there was some amazing people there. But yeah, the financial structure of what you have to do well at a large recruiting organization is different, right? It is much higher volume. So maybe there was some retraining.
You know, this has been a personal journey for you, a personal journey that's included spinning up a whole other company. But if somebody's like, okay, I need to slow down. I want to go deeper. I got to be fucking different this year. What recommendations would you have for them? Like, read books? Do you focus on people? Like, how do you learn to be better with people in 2026?
I mean, man, there's so many answers to this from my perspective. But I mean, honestly, like doing things like, of course, there's reading books, listening to podcasts. One of the great things about listening to something like the Elite Recruiter podcast is twofold. One, you get to hear all these new perspectives, right? You listen to a podcast, and even if you take experienced recruiters know, even if I can take a tiny snippet of 15 seconds from an hour-long podcast, it was well worth the hour-long listen, right? But I think another thing that it allows you to do is to see how similar we all are in these certain ways. I think in some ways it affirms you to be like, that's a good thing. You know, okay, sweet. They're doing really well. We're doing well. That thing seems to be a consistent thing that we're both doing, and that's leading to some good things. But I think it also shows you the other side where it's like, oh shoot, we've been telling everybody like, nobody does it like this. Nobody does it like us. You know, it's the thing that you see on LinkedIn where it's like, I'm ready to talk about something nobody's talking about. And then in the comments, they're like, everyone everywhere is talking about this. What are you talking, you know? And so, I think for recruiters, I think that's a tricky balance. And I don't have the answer to this one, is being really plugged in on social media, really honing your feed in and your algorithm to make sure that you're staying up to date on the pulse of the market and what other recruiters are doing and saying, so that you can know, are we cutting edge or are we doing similar things? But I think the flip side, the pro and the con, I think the con is that can lead to some insecurities. It can lead to some, a lot of comparing, which, thief of joy type thing. I am constantly trying to read books. There's a podcast called Founders Podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's just like you listen to and you see these things where it's like, yeah, you may have to take in quite a bit of content just to get a few little tidbits. But I think in today's age, you really don't have an option. And I mean that. I think with the way that we're going towards all of the tools and like, there's so many amazing AI tools, right? I mean, you're an ambassador for one. Like we use all of them. Like they're amazing. There is no, I don't ever want to come across as and this is a played out conversation, but I think that with the way that all of those are coming, it's the cliche, like we're all going to start blending together more and more and more if we don't get to the core, if we don't get to these deeper levels. And a great example is take the personality tests that we take, whether it's Strength Finders or DISC or whatever. You take one of these personality tests and you read the feedback at the end about you and you're like, oh my gosh, dude, how did this nail me? This is me. But there's still context. There's still nuance, right? But that's where I get scared to say, we like to say, me included, AI is great, but I don't think it can ever replace the human element. If we don't go deeper, why would a personality test be able to bottle us up into this perfect description, but all these tools that are brilliant and mind-blowing couldn't? That's a hard line in the sand for me to say it couldn't do that. But what I don't think it could do is get to those levels. I think that's why it's so important now that we're aware of this.
Let's role play this a little bit. You're a recruiter listening to this, like whether you've done bad, whether you've had a 2025 was a fucking struggle, you're drawing the line in the sand to make a 2026 your year, which you absolutely should do. But let's go deeper. As a recruiter, let's do a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and figure out why you are actually different. I think Mike Ames called it like, we're all ice cream, but just different flavors, but we're still ice cream at the end of the day. Like, how do you figure out why your flavor is special of ice cream? And how do you like share that, portray that? But we'll make that the second part. What would be tier 1 questions or tier 1 thinking?
So like number 1 for me would be like, I'm always trying to figure out new ways to do things, right? So let's say that I say that as my differentiator.
Okay. Tier 1,
right?
Tier 1. Tier 1.
Love looking for new ways to do things. And a lot of times we'll stop there, right? Why should we give you this job? I love looking for new ways to do things. Be like, okay, not bad in itself. Good thing to know. What does that look like? Number 2, I'm constantly listening to books, podcasts, listening to other founders, listening to recruiters. Okay. Still good. What does that mean? Tier 3, like, well, we've been looking at solutions for things that we can do. Here's the problems that we're trying to dissect. Here's what we've been doing. We've been spending time on LinkedIn to look at the market, to listen to candidates. We're having candidate conversations, not to place them, but to hear their pain points. What do they really want solved? And how can we actually start to get to the root of the conversation? How can we dissect all of these big internet heated emotional battles of screw the companies? No, screw the candidates. No, like none of that is productive, right? So tier 3 is we're trying to block out all of that and get to the core of like, what is the real pain point here, right? Like, what are people actually having a problem with? And then tier 4 is you go into whole story, right? For us, that was like, we see the problem, identified it. We love finding new ways to do things. Number 2, number 3, number 4 is we created a platform because we believe that the problem is not that we need to get more people to more companies faster. We actually think the bar has become too high. This is not a position that's accepted by as many as you'd think. So now we're trying to come up with ways how do we raise the bar while not making it to where people can't, we're trying to come up with a solution that works for everybody. So we created Whole Story, a platform that allows candidates to tell who they really are. We get with the candidates. So now at 4, and you know what that cost us? I mean, it's the same thing with you with this podcast. I'd love to look at that as an example. Like tier 1, not to put it on you, but like, what would you just say your general of like why you do the podcast is?
If you want to get a laugh, it all started because I was bored during COVID and wanted to talk to somebody.
Huh?
5 years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and so if you went like to another level, what would you say?
I'd say it got real when somebody shot me a message saying completely like listening to the guests completely changed their life. And they were on a large slump and they were just like, they picked up one or two nuggets and they completely turned around the quarter, had a few $100,000 quarter after like just blanks. And I was just like, I think that was like early on. And I think it took me 4 years to get even a single sponsor. I was just like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing it, but there's a little voice in the back of my head saying like, you got to keep going for somebody.
Dude, do you see like when you're talking about that and we're not even at, well, I mean, you brushed up against tier 4. That pumps you up. It does, dude. Like that is hearing that gives so much more soul. Now I know that because if you listen to the pod, you can feel that coming out of you, right? But hearing that is like, gosh, that's different, man. Man, that's really different. Your time, 4 years. Are you kidding me? You know how many people are willing to do something for 4 years, even if it does well for them? You know, it's like time, money, putting yourself out there, risk.
I kind of joked around for a long time. I hold the biggest not-for-profit in the recruiting space.
Dude, like, but so that's what I'm talking about. So the difference between the top, you know, if I wanted to talk, and I don't want to speak for you, but like there had to be something to of like this, if this could help somebody. I mean, like it's the way you talk that oozes out of you. This is so selfless.
If my wife actually saw how much money I've spent on this thing, she'd kill me.
That's what I'm talking about, you know? So that's like, there's cost associated. That's how quickly we got here though. And I think that is what's important to hear that difference. And here's what I'll say too, as a recruiter, and I know that not every recruiter is the same and, you know, but that feeling that I get when you're talking about that, and I'm not trying to be cheesy, that's something that like when the cliche, like that made me lean in. That did. Like hearing that story, being able to associate it with somebody, dude, you changed somebody's life. Hand up. What if you never did anything for anybody else, but that one person, you ended up, look what you did for them. Worth it, in my opinion.
So if somebody's listening to this podcast and, you know, I always joke around, I'm like, this isn't about me. So shifting your role there.
Sure.
But how do you like sit down like and do an exercise where you start finding that thing that makes you different, that value that you bring, the thing that you can bring to the market that nobody else really can? Maybe not nobody else, but like very few can.
Yeah. So we're actually doing something internal today where I was talking about, you know, like a lot of times within your own teams, the trust levels hopefully are high, right? And the support levels are high. And you kind of know how people feel about you, which is great because you're comfortable in that and the encouragement's high. But I said, a lot of times I think that we aren't aware of what these things are because we don't discuss them enough. And take whole story, for example, one of the things that we encourage people to do is to share these things, their whole story, with people that they know, to say like, is this me? Or would you look at this or read this and not even know who it was talking about? So like, I think as a recruiter, if you're sitting there wondering how to get to this level, I think a great exercise or even potentially more importantly is maybe start with yourself, right? So like sit down. And I think one of the major ways you do that is by going to the people that not only that you trust, but who you respect, like who can speak to those things from being around you and knowing you and starting to see the difference between, I think I'm a pretty hard worker, but then you hear somebody else who's like, man, I've never seen somebody do it like you. The way that you eat up feedback, the way that you crave it, the way that it's so obvious that you want to get better. And you start to be like, wow. I mean, not only does it feel good, but it allows you to open your eyes about something that like, and maybe you're a humble person and you don't like to admit like, maybe I am kind of good at that. And I think that helps to start with yourself. But then I think also when you think about candidates, because there's some candidates who will go there without you even pushing them. I mean, you know, the ones, right? You've talked to ones where it's like, man, that was just, I barely had to talk and I feel like I was having dinner with them. And I think you start working backwards from those candidates to get to the ones, and also there will be some times where it's uncomfortable. We know times as recruiters where you're talking to somebody who it feels like they want to get off the phone, right? Is that something that we don't want to acknowledge as like, maybe this isn't the fit, you know, like we're going for something because this search is so hard. So we're going to make this work. That person barely wanted to talk to me. They wouldn't give me the time of day, but they've got all the skills. They've got this. We're going to get them over. They're going to get the job. And then in 6 months to a year, they're gone because And there's some context to that, right? You have somebody who's having a bad day. You have somebody who's been burned by recruiters. They're just frustrated, whatever. But I think taking an assessment of yourself and then taking an assessment of those candidates who do it for you, you start to work your way back for younger recruiters. And honestly, the more seasoned recruiters I have, I think they know. I just think they know. I really do. I think that you hear it. I think that you listen to the difference between, what we were talking about with the we're a family and putting tires on a car. You talk to I started the podcast because I was bored and wanted to talk to somebody's reaching out to me being like, this actually changed my life. If you can't see the difference between the two of those, then I don't think there's a formula in the world that's going to get you there.
I think you also made an important point. Like, this is something that you're building your internal framework, you're writing this down, you're walking through it, but the power of somebody else that you respect, that is positive, shedding some light on some things that you're probably not looking at.
Yeah. I think that's just also I think it's such an encouraging exercise to do. I think it makes you vulnerable in a good way. And I think, that's like, I've got a coach that I played for in college, something that I always try to do, these people who do these jobs that, not that they're thankless, because they're not, I think they get a lot of thanks for it. But like when you think of those things with somebody, I think and this is becoming a broader topic, but I think that sharing those encouraging things, constantly encouraging someone, hey, I noticed this about you and I love it. I think that allows people to do that for themselves. How many times when you get feedback from a client, like it feels amazing because they didn't owe it to you. It's, hey, I just wanted to tell you this because I'm really impressed with it. So I think that's so important for so many different reasons that I hope, especially as recruiters in a job where we talk to thousands of candidates, right? We're not getting thanked a lot. So if you have those people that are able to prop you up and help encourage you and get you to that level, I think that's so critically important. And I think it's just as important for the most seasoned veteran recruiters, even if you don't think it because you got confidence out the roof and you don't need people's approval and you don't need affirmation. I am a huge advocate of it. And I think that I think it goes a long way.
Shifting gears a little bit, mostly due to time. Like you're sitting there like walking through these tiers with somebody, with a client. Like we're looking to try to dig for the positive. How do you keep the conversation from going absolutely to the garbage? Like how do you control the conversation so it doesn't become a shitty conversation?
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is something that's extremely relevant currently. Like I know that we're all in different niches, some places are doing great, right? Same thing with COVID. Some people are trying to hold on to their people. Some places are, if you sell hand sanitizer, you're exploding, or M90, whatever masks, you're exploding. A lot right now, we're seeing these candidates who have applied to hundreds of jobs and heard nothing back, right? They feel like they're starting to get to a place. I'm talking about up to C-level, great resumes, great backgrounds, no reason to doubt themselves, great track records. But when you've applied to hundreds of jobs and heard nothing back, not even a no, or auto rejections, whatever, that starts to get to a tricky place. And you start to get to a place mentally where it's like, is it me? Like, do I actually have value in this world that we're moving into? All these tools, all this AI, have I lost my value without those things? And so I think as the recruiter, it's a big responsibility of ours to encourage, again, to go back to encourage these people, but also to let them know. So when you're telling them that what they're doing is not coming across as unique, I compare it to like, think about if you have kids, when your kid's doing something, how much easier is it to just be like, fine, just do what you're doing. You'll figure it out. That's fine. Whatever. Like, I don't even want it. The conversation is going to be hard, or with the spouse or a friend where there's a little bit of friction. And I think that you could rub people the wrong way. I think that sometimes it may come across that way, but I think when you approach it, tone is important, but when you approach it to say, look, my only goal is to get you to a great place where you want to be, to get you to a place where you fit, and where you can bring value. And so I want to give you the best chance at that. I've got to be honest with you. Here's what we're seeing. And I think when you give them the examples right in front of them to where this isn't my opinion, I'm showing you facts. This is data. This is 80% of the people you're going up against also said that they're a hard worker. It's the trickiest time that I've experienced to do that. But I think that given time, even the ones who are offended, and there may be some who will be offended and it's like, you know what? Like, this may be something a little bit deeper. Maybe you aren't the type that would be receptive to that. And that's okay. And there's signals to be had everywhere, like maybe that's something to note. But I think it's really important on tone and in showing the motivation for why you're asking and why you're trying to go deeper, and also to show them actual data and statistics and not just say, this is my opinion. Or when I talk to you, I don't get warm and fuzzy thinking about, like, I think it comes down to, I need to show you and not just tell you.
Just for time, because the conversation flew, before we jump over to the quick fire questions that they don't need to be quick answers, is there anything else that I missed or you wanted to go deeper on?
I think on this, the main thing that we're seeing now is just that all these tools are amazing. Don't quit using them. Stay up to date on all of them. But this is the thing that slowly, I think, infiltrates its way in. And then 5 years from now, it's a thing where it's like, oh man, we don't even know how to get back to that level. We're so uniform. We're productive, but we can't go below that. Now we are a replaceable type thing. And I think that that is something that we just have to be aware of why it's important.
So you've been an agency recruiter, you have your own firm, you have a team now. You talk to a lot of other recruiters. What do you think is one of the biggest pieces of advice to give a good recruiter that wants to go elite?
I think that recruiting is an emotional game, can be. And I think that looking for the ways, especially now, again, where I think 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years ago, the changes could be much more incremental, small to make a big difference. Now it feels like you've got to move earth to even keep up with the things that some of these things are doing. And so I think to go from good to elite, to me, in today's climate, feels like if you're not going to the core, this is why this is all so pertinent, because it's like, if we can't go to the core, we'll never get to a real solution. We'll just keep going Band-Aids. We'll keep going from, I've got this coffee mug, I need something different, let's just do a bigger mug. That doesn't work. And so I think going good to elite these days is addressing at the core and going for different solutions. And it was told to me not long ago, and this is not an arrogant point of view from which the guy was saying it, but he said, you can't listen to the market. You listen to the market for pain points, but you don't listen to the market necessarily for solutions, because they're a lot of times doing that. Here's what's worked. That's the viewpoint of what I'm creating these solutions from, is what I know. And so I think that trying to do things, you have to make sure that you're detached from that. I think that's important from going to good to elite.
Book that's had the biggest impact on your career.
This is, I mentioned it earlier, Atomic Habits is amazing. That's probably one that you've heard. That's just one that I think everybody should read. New Year, read Atomic Habits, no matter what. But there's one called Dopamine Nation by Anna Lembke. And it goes into the effects of a lot of these things that we don't quite realize, whether it's screen time, or, I mean, it could be, as serious as alcohol or drugs, or it could be, anything that we're addicted to, our work, it could be anything, but we don't quite see the effects. And I think when you are able to get more of a perspective on what's going on, I think that it propels you in your career. I think that you're able to do it much more free. It's like your wings are tied up with duct tape and you just come in with scissors and you cut, and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that things could feel this way. And so it's called Dopamine Nation. It's great. I recommend it to anybody. And I think it actually plays in recruiting.
I know we've been talking about anti-tech and I'm not anti-tech, but is there a tool that a recruiting tool that you cannot live without?
I mean, it's not so new, but the MetaView, Quill, all of those, the note-taking apps, they're so good. They're so good.
And I've been watching you online a lot recently. We got introduced by a coach. Have you had a coach help you in the recruiting space move the needle?
So in the recruiting space itself, I would say it was more mentors. But yeah, the coach, can I give him a shout out? Yeah, Clark Wilcox. I don't know if so he's more of creating your entire ecosystem. I mean, he can absolutely coach you on the recruiting side, but I've had a life coach before. But yeah, Clark coached us on a lot of that stuff, and I think it's super effective. I think that it's worth it even to get that perspective, that unbiased third-party perspective, to come in and do an audit of what you're doing. I think the results in it can't even quantify. So much more than what you paid to get.
What's one of the biggest challenges that you've had to walk through?
I think knowing whether to do more of the same, just do more of it. Are we not doing enough, or are we doing the wrong thing? I think that has been a challenge, especially over the last year or two. Whereas 10 years ago, I think it was pound the pavement harder, call more emails, more texts, more LinkedIn, whatever. And I think that now that is the toughest thing, is to know day in, day out, are we doing the right thing and we just need to do more of it? Or are we doing the wrong thing and we need to pivot?
That's so true right there. So with you being out there, you having your firm, you've been on other podcasts. I'm sure people have hit you up asking for advice. Like, how do I go deeper with this? Or how do you actually structure this into actually making sales? How do you structure this into X, Y, Z? Like talking to a bunch of recruiters, like, do you ever wish, this is probably perfect for you, you guys ask these conversations and these questions, what's a question that you wish they would ask you, but they never do?
Oh, this is one that I love to ask people when things got the worst. What the darkest days? Because I think that we talk a lot in recruiting. You sell this grand picture of how much money you can make and the amazing things about it. And I think that what a lot of recruiters, myself included, are a lot of times not prepared for is like the days when you're like, there's no worse job than this. Recruiting is the worst job in the world. When those thoughts are going through your mind, to be like, I got to get it. I mean, how many people do get out of it? Right. So I think that is what I wish the guys talking about when they get in, because you don't want to discourage them, right? You don't want to snuff out the flame. You don't want to, they're excited about it. They've heard good things about it. They know people who have done great. And so you don't want to say like, hey, this is going to be great, but it's going to be tough. Like, no, it's not just going to be tough. There's going to be some days where you're like, what am I doing this? And so I think that allowing some perspective there and be like, man, it's going to be okay. But really walking through, what did you feel in those moments? What did you do? Did you compromise on things? So I think that's something that's important to ask so that when you hit those, you pull from that.
For you personally, like, you've been doing this for years. What was that dark day that you were just like, I don't know if I could do this anymore?
Not dark day. It was dark days.
Dark days.
But I think, there's, I've got a young family, 3 kids, and I've got a team that works with me. I think that those days are when you look and be like, I don't know that we're going to make it till the end of the year. And there could be many reasons for that, right? It could be that you just, honestly, it could come on the heels of a bad weekend, or you've got a newborn and you're low on sleep, right? So you're not thinking about things as clearly. But I think it's those times when you look and say, how are we going to make it? How am I going to make it? I have no candidates. We have no jobs. I have no prospects. I feel like I'm bad at the job. It's very similar to what I empathize with these job seekers in this market. A lot of times I've applied to this many jobs, I've heard nothing back. And so I think that that's when it's so important to fall back the atomic habits. I think it's so you're rooted in these things that don't toss with the wind type thing. And you always go back to those. For me, it's like, let's say whatever bad habit I'm doing at the moment, let's rein it all back in. I want to get back to reading the things that inspire me. I want to listen to the podcasts that I know got me to where I am. I want to schedule lunches with the people that I know will tell me, would you just relax? You're fine. You're fine. Like, get back to the basics. You know what to do. I think those things are so important. And that's why I think if you can, the good recruiters that I know are the ones who just like this, maybe a little bump here when they, big, hit President's Club or have a great year or whatever, there's a little bump. But I think getting back to those things that root you, I think that's the thing that gets me through those always. And I couldn't be more thankful. Like, family support's unbelievable. Friend support's unbelievable. But there's times where you just feel so alone in this game. And I think that's when you got to hold tight to those relationships, those good habits.
I love that. Absolutely love that. So 2 last questions. If somebody wants to follow you, how do they go about doing that?
LinkedIn is a great place. Jacob Stripling on LinkedIn, but we've got wholestory.me. It is really something exciting that we're doing, and I'm really pumped about it. It's a new way of doing things. There's video interviews, but Whole Story includes a lot of different elements. So that's wholestory.me. Our recruiting website is futurestatecareers.com, and then LinkedIn, and all my contact information is on LinkedIn. I love talking with people about all this stuff.
Yeah, Whole Story, is that something I could use as a BD tool?
Could use it for anything you want. It's honestly we've all got whole stories ourselves that we use reaching out to customers, because when we're trying to differentiate, hey, here's a little something about me. And honestly, for recruiters, Whole Story is a free platform as is right now. So we have it works as a vetting tool. It works as a sales tool. It works. Just go look at it. You can see my profile on there, and it's free to use right now. So use it while you can.
And is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners before I let you go?
No, I love what you say. 2026 is a year to kill it. We're seeing some signals, some signs that I think better things are coming. Not that bad things have been here, and I think also like just the feedback from the market we're getting is there's a lot of frustration. And I think I think that's the start of something much better. And I think the good things are coming.
This has been an awesome conversation. So definitely thank you for sharing. Cause like, here's one of the things, like you need to figure out what makes you different. You need to figure out what you can do in this market that is your differentiator. So you don't sound like every other recruiting firm out there, every other agency. How can you help a client and a candidate move the needle? The reason why I want to have this conversation, because I think so often we can easily get caught up in the minutia of doing what we do. And as you said, Jacob, like all these tools that we absolutely love and we use, they're all being trained on our data. They're being trained on our conversations. Give it a few more years. You got to figure out what makes yourself different.
Yeah.
But man, I truly believe in you. 2026 is going to be your year. Draw the line in the sand. Let's make shit happen. Admin is a massive waste of time. That's why there's Atlas, the AI first recruitment platform built for modern agencies. It doesn't only track resumes and calls, it remembers everything. Every email, every interview, every conversation, instantly searchable, always available, and now it's entering a whole new era. With Atlas 2.0, you can ask anything and it delivers. With Magic Search, you speak and it listens. It finds the right candidates using real conversations, not simply looking for keywords. Atlas 2.0 also makes business development easier than ever. With opportunities, you can track, manage, and grow client relationships, powered by generative AI and built right into your workflow. Need insights? Custom dashboards give you total visibility over your pipeline. And that's not theory. Atlas customers have reported up to 41% EBITDA growth and an 85% increase in monthly billings after adopting the platform. No admin, no silos, no lost info, nothing but faster shortlists, better hires, and more time to focus on what actually drives revenue. Atlas is your personal AI partner for modern recruiting. Don't miss the future of recruitment. Get started with Atlas today and unlock your exclusive listener offer at recruitwithatlas.com.